Hello, everyone. This is Sharon Heller with Network in Action in Denver, and I'm here today with Lara Fordis with Fordis Consulting. Hello, Lara.
Hi, Sharon. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me today. I think it's a great time to be talking to you so that you can educate us a little bit today about market research and why it's not just for big business. And maybe we can start off with you just giving a really brief summary for the many business owners out there who still don't know, like, what is market research? Can you just define that for us?
Sure, I should have brushed up on that. But essentially, market research is consumer insights as it pertains to business, B2B, as well as B2C. Most market research, I would say, is done in the B2C category, and it can range from anything. There's sort of two buckets. There's qualitative research, which is focus groups, in-depth interviews, ethnographies. And then there's quantitative research, which is surveys or telephone, whether that be done on telephone or online or via the mail. Typically now, only a small amount of surveys is really done other than online. And I'm fortunate to be methodologically agnostic. I do both qualitative and quantitative research. Oftentimes people fall into one or the other, but a lot of times that's why people end up coming to me, because they don't know exactly what they need and they want someone who doesn't have a conflict of interest in terms of guiding them in one direction or another.
Awesome. So with that foundation of having some basic understanding of what market research is, based on your really good explanation, I still always thought that market research was more for those big brands. I think about Domino's Pizza and I think about Coca-Cola and, these big companies. And of course, they've got a big budget and they can invest in market research. But why would I, as a small business owner, consider doing it?
Well, you should definitely only do it if you can get a return on investment. That's sort of the litmus test for anything.
Okay.
But oftentimes people think of market research as being the purview of big CPG companies and places like that. But it really doesn't have to be. There are lots and lots of small agencies. When people think of agencies, they may think of a big one that has, tons of millennials running around and having unlimited coffee and pool tables and lots of overhead. And there are lots of agencies that don't have that and aren't looking for those big budget clients. So the reason to do market research, even if you're a small business, is because you want to optimize your expenditures on marketing and on product optimization. So I think of it as beginning with the end in mind. That sort of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Successful People. Begin with the end in mind. And then looking at marketing as something in the middle and market research as sharpening that saw. So if you take a beat, invest what can be a relatively nominal amount in market research. Projects can be anywhere from $3,000 and up. We're not talking about tens of thousands of dollars for the average small business. Mm-hmm. And understanding your target consumer and what they want and what messages are going to resonate with them. I've had multiple occasions where people have come into a business completely well-intentioned, entrepreneurial, spirited, and so they assume that their business offering is going to appeal to the target audience for whom it was designed.
Right.
So I'm thinking of right now of a product that happened to have been designed for people who smoke joints, which is legal here in Colorado and some other states. And it was designed in mind that it was going to appeal to connoisseurs, people who are really particular about their cannabis and the dampness of it and the freshness of it. But when we tested this device, it was actually best suited to parents who don't want their kids to know that they smoke weed. And so it had an unintended, an attribute had an unintended benefit that appealed to a much larger target than what it was originally intended for. And that happened with another product that I dealt with earlier this year, where it was assumed to be for one thing, and the actual most revenue generating potential audience was different than that. So if they went into their branding and marketing and sales strategies without understanding that they had a different optimal target audience than what they expected, they would have missed out on a lot of potential revenue that because they were thinking myopically, not small, but just myopically about who their product was intended for.
Right. That's really interesting and really important, because I think we think we know, who our audience is, or we know who we think we're shooting for. But if it's something different than that, that's so vital. And I know a lot of people out there who are using free surveys like SurveyMonkey, or they're even doing polls in Facebook, and they're saying, help me with some market research. What's the downfall of going about it in that way?
Well, unfortunately, and that happens quite a lot, where people use SurveyMonkey or a similar free or low cost platform, and then they design it either using templates, which can be quite flawed. I actually did a presentation on the the downfalls of using SurveyMonkey templates for a conference a few years back. And then they're using what's called a self-selected sample. So if you're surveying people who are in your orbit because they're on your Facebook page, or they're friends or friends of a friend's, or an uncle's first cousin's husband's friends of a friend's, like it's still in your orbit, and it's not a representative sample. So then you run the risk of drawing conclusions and extrapolating about the findings in a way that's flawed. And that's not to say that even using big providers of survey sample doesn't have its flaws, but they're going to be at a much smaller margin of error. Whereas if you're using self-selected sample, like on your Facebook page, that's really dangerous. That can lead you to have an inflated sense of its potential, and then, you can quit your job, spend your life savings and all that kind of stuff, and it doesn't turn out well. And we've all heard stories of that. That cliche, Aunt Karen bakes an awesome carrot cake, and so she's going to open up a bakery, and then everyone's fueling Karen's passion. And unfortunately, just because everyone loves something doesn't mean they're willing to pay money for it. So they're not likely to have done secondary research on the competitive landscape, and they obviously didn't do primary research on people's willingness to pay for it. And as much as it's a bummer for me to have to tell a startup that their product isn't financially viable, I actually just had that experience on Sunday. I did some in-home use testing on a board game prototype. That's a great idea, but luckily the startup understood that it has some limitations, and so it's not going to go forward now. But better to learn that early than to roll out something and have it be like a freight train with no end. But obviously my preference is to do market research and have it turn out to be an optimization of a great product or a great service, or the packaging or marketing of that product.
Right. And of course, that's the entrepreneur's hope too. But I really agree with you that to find out sooner than later if it's not a viable product or a viable business, or whatever's being offered, is so important to save people that time and money and grief.
Oh yeah, it's invaluable. And sometimes people have a single-mindedness, and they're going to go forward no matter what. But the clients that tend to come to me, they're through word of mouth or through a trademark agent or an intellectual property attorney, or however they get to me, usually have enough savvy to know that they need to do some preliminary primary custom research.
Yeah. And why would someone want to reach out to you? How would they benefit reaching out to you versus another market researcher out there? What do you have to offer?
Sure. I mean, that's a fair question because there are lots of us out there. One point I alluded to before is that I tend to weigh the pros and cons of everything, and I'm not attached to a particular methodology. So while I may be more passionate about doing focus groups or in-depth interviews, I also have been using Qualtrics as a survey platform for almost 10 years and do quantitative work. What I've found is that a lot of times the best thing that I'm able to do that's different than most researchers. Number one, I'm totally I'm, I'm, I'm totally much more affordable than a typical agency because I don't have the overhead to which I alluded to earlier. But also, I take a really outside of the box approach to market research. I think that a lot of times you need a multi-methodology approach. So, for instance, I'll do focus groups initially to understand and explore what's going on, and then use surveys to either validate or disprove what we found in the qualitative research. And so what I like about being able to provide that is that people, especially in different roles, are inspired by different types of data. Some people like to hear the voice of the consumer. Some people like charts and tables and are, strictly data driven. So being able to marry those two approaches so that the output is more holistic, more well-rounded, I find really resonates with my clients. And that's why I've been really fortunate to be entirely word of mouth for 7 years. And I've been in market research about 22 years, but on my own for about 7.
Wow. Well, a few things that I hear that I just want to highlight are you have tremendous experience. You offer a really well-rounded, kind of a holistic approach that it sounds like it's very customized to each client. And I love what you said about your out of the box kind of approach, and really being able to hone in and find what's going to be the most accurate approach to take for each client. And, it's an important thing to underscore that you're affordable also, because I think there is that misconception out there that a small business owner is going to have to come up with $10,000 to $15,000 to do market research. And it sounds like that's really not the case.
No, it's not the case at all. It doesn't have to be prohibitive. And that's why a lot of times people come to me and they want a proposal, and I don't want to give someone a Mercedes-Benz proposal when they're a startup and I know they're on a Kia budget. And so I really take the time to explore with potential clients what their unmet needs are, what their goals are, what's the business decisions that they're going to be making as the result of the research, and then work backwards so that I can give them a sort of a la carte sense of what you can do. And things can be in phases. They don't have to be all in. So sometimes doing, a focus group followed by a 200-person survey is a very affordable way to go, as opposed to doing, 4 focus groups and then 1,000 surveys. You can have a sort of funnel approach to it and see where it takes you. And you can always do more,
Right.
But I don't, I want market research to be perceived as an investment that delivers return, not a line item expense, because I want people to be able to take a step back and say, wow, as a result of this, our increased revenue was XYZ. And unlike some things, it's not as concretely measurable as that, but I always make sure that my clients are satisfied or that I've exceeded their expectations. And in the event that I ever didn't, I would always go back and make it right. And sometimes we've had to add on here and there in order to get a more nuanced view of something.
Mm-hmm.
But because I've been doing this a long time, I usually know what's going to work and what's not going to work. But I'm always open to course correcting when
Yeah,
something doesn't go as planned, which sometimes it doesn't. And
right.
I think a lot of it is, how do you handle it when it doesn't go exactly the
Yeah.
way you expected? How do you make it right?
Yeah. Thank you, Lara. Well, this
Sure.
was very informative, and I hope this video inspires small business owners to at least consider market research, for them to reach out to you and perhaps just have a conversation to explore. How would someone go about reaching out to you?
Oh, well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Lara Fordis, or you can go to our website, which is fordisconsulting.com, or you can call me the old-fashioned way at 720-460-7393. And I love talking about market research. I'm passionate. I'm kind of a gregarious data nerd, so I really enjoy talking to people about what the possibilities are to increase their success and to be part of it.
Thank you, Lara. Your enthusiasm comes through. And if I was going to hire someone to do market research, I would want them to be enthusiastic about the work. So thank you very much for your time today. And I look forward to speaking again soon.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. It was great chatting with you too. Bye.